Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Once again, welcome to the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 129. Another week has come to an end. Today is Friday, April 3rd. I'm supposed to be playing a practice round for the Cleveland Heights 4-ball in Lakeland, Florida this weekend. But like the rest of the world, everything has come to a screeching halt. Hope that you all are taking this pandemic seriously. Please stay at home. I know that some states and some countries, for that matter, have different regulations in place, but staying home is the best thing that we can all do right now. This isn't political. This is just good common sense. Stay home and stay healthy. Speaking of Friday, it's typically the worst day to release a new podcast episode. I've always heard that. I've never released an episode on a Friday. I guess people are kind of getting geared up for the weekends and they're just checked out. But you're probably doing the same thing this weekend as you've done all week, with hopefully a little more free time thrown in. So let's just get another episode out and share this content. In this episode, I am joined by the host of Morning Drive on Golf Channel, Gary Williams. Gary and I met a year ago at the Winter Park 9 golf course near Orlando. I was up in the area at a podcast convention. I'm whispering so no one hears it and remembers it. Anyway, I was up in the area and I heard about all these Friday Skins games that Matt Janella hosted. And I follow him on Instagram and I figured, let me just show up and see what this is all about. Well, I then find myself playing in a sevensome with Janella, Jaime Diaz from Golf Channel, and Gary Williams. We had a great day, exchanged contact information, and we kept in touch and knew that at some point we would need to record an episode. Well, we caught up last week for a 2-hour conversation that just flew by. Seriously, this is a massive episode. We hit on a lot of topics. We could have tackled so much more, but this is a good start. And we both realized that we got to do it again soon. Don't worry, it will happen. One of the things we spoke about was how the Golf Channel handled the cancellation of the players and the dissemination of the information from the PGA Tour that they relayed to the viewer. So, unprecedented situation, and it was interesting to see how it all unfolded from a behind-the-scenes perspective. Then Gary shared some Palmer stories, some Nicklaus stories, and really a fantastic story at the end of this episode about his hero, Ben Crenshaw. Before we get to the conversation, I know you're all looking for fresh content out there, so make sure you follow Gary's podcast, One Up. You'll find it. It's One Up with Gary Williams. He's relaunching the podcast. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to happen, but go find it and subscribe, and then you'll be notified. So let's get to this episode. It's a big one. It's a great episode. Gary, finally, welcome to the Back of the Range, sir. How are you?
Ben, I'm good. I'm good, and I hope you are. You and I, we're going to do this at some point.
Yeah, I know.
There is not a chance on God's green earth that either you or I thought we were going to do it under these circumstances. But here we are, and I'm looking forward to just talking to you about something we both love.
Absolutely. No, I know we first time we met, we played in that we played that bizarre sevensome at Winter Park 9 back. I think it was what was that? Last March, I think. Yeah, it was like a year ago. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, so that was we'll get into that a little bit later because that was a really fun round. I think Janelle was there and Jaime Diaz was there, and I was like, well, this is like it's like a Golf Channel Thursday afternoon league match or something. It was really bizarre, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, the sevensome is actually that's a small group.
Oh, okay.
The Skins game, until we had to obviously put it on a hiatus, it got to the point where the last group, which I'm generally in, is now, Ben, it's swelled to usually there's probably 12.
Oh God.
In the last group, and now that the days are getting longer, and hopefully we'll get back at it at some point this summer. And look forward to you and I playing either there or somewhere else down the road.
We got to do that. So as I'm telling the listeners as they listen to these episodes, I'm kind of sharing when we record just so they understand if we start talking about something coronavirus related that doesn't apply anymore. So today's Thursday, March 26th, and We're both holding up the best we can. You're up in the Winter Park, Orlando area. You got the wife. You have one of your daughters with you. So, I spoke recently to Coach Ryan Hibble from Oklahoma, and he has two daughters and the wife, and then every animal, I think, at his house, whether it's a cat, dog, whatever, female. He is surrounded by all females. So it's not even an island of misfit toys. It's like an island of misfit Barbies. How are you holding up just estrogen all over the place? How are you holding up?
You know what? I was well trained because my dad, who was in the paper industry, but virtually his entire career, he wound up going back and doing some teaching and was one of the admissions directors at the University of North Carolina Business School. But that was really, twilight. But nonetheless, he was on the road a lot. But I have two older sisters. So my mother saw any highlight that I ever had in Little League Baseball or bitty basketball. She witnessed those few examples. My dad was gone a lot, so I had practice, but I have two daughters, as you mentioned. One of them is actually up in Charlotte. She goes to the college at Charleston, but she's staying with my sister-in-law, who's lives in South Charlotte. My in-laws are there, so she's really in a very good, safe place for her. She was down here and then went back up with my in-laws. And then my oldest daughter is a senior in high school. It's the three of us, but I do have a little man in the house, my dog Bucky.
There you go.
Who will be 9 in April. And I got to be honest. First of all, I think he was a human in a former life. He's very evolved. He looks at you with a look like, if I could only tell you what's on my mind. But he's thriving because I do give him. I do indulge him with scraps, and the fact that we're home for every meal now.
Oh yeah.
This is. I mean, he really feels like this is the greatest season of his life, and he doesn't want it to end.
Yeah, that is definitely something that I've seen on social media. Pets are just loving this right now. I mean, they are just like, or at some point the pets are like, all right, can you leave? I normally, sleep 8 hours a day. You're kind of.
I agree with you. There is a balance. It's like, all right, there are a lot of benefits here, but at some point, get the hell out.
Yeah,
can I have my solitude back, please?
Pretty much, yeah. I can see how that would happen. We're gonna hit on your start at the Golf Channel because I don't know if that's been covered much, and I found out a couple things that I just find really interesting that I got to get you to hit on. But before we do that, the last time you were on TV, I think, or really. Extensively when the world was normal was around the Players. And I can't still believe that it was just 2 weeks ago today.
It's amazing, Ben. It's amazing that it was just that. And I'll tell you, my week, my responsibilities that week, it was supposed to be in addition to, morning drive, which would be leading into third round coverage. And then obviously the final round on Saturday and Sunday, which was going to be the 14th and the 15th of this month. In addition to that, I was also doing Golf Central the entire week. I was actually from the prior weekend on morning drive into that week. And then subsequently what was supposed to be the aftermath of the Players into Valspar was going to be a 12 straight day stretch for me of being on the air. And so I was doing Golf Central hits from the studio, basically as a sponsored elements. They'd come back to Orlando. So like, for instance, Monday night, which was the 2 hour live from the Players to lift the lid with Rich and his team.
Right.
I did a couple of, 60 to 90 minute supplemental hits on, again, the sponsored elements. Tuesday, we were on from, 9 a.m. To 5 p.m. and then back from 7 to 9. I was there all day doing stuff. Same thing Wednesday. And then I was doing early on Thursday, Friday, and then was going to do Saturday, Sunday after morning drive. And what happened was I did the early stuff on Thursday, came home, and then I was going to be back anyway to do the evening stuff as well. And when we finished, I drove home, I showered, and I was getting ready to just kind of unwind with my wife. It was about 10 p.m. I got a call from Molly Solomon, our executive producer, and Matt Haggerty, our senior coordinating producer over special events, including all the live froms. They both called me back to back and said, we need you to get to the studio right away. I was the one who came on the air. It was about 10:40 by the time. I was very proud of myself. I got to down I-4, which is the worst road on planet Earth, in about 22 minutes, through makeup, popped me on the air. I announced what a lot of people had already seen on social media with Jay Monahan electronically alerting the entire field that they had canceled the event. Todd Lewis came on the phone. Todd did a brilliant job of, he slept
there. He slept there.
Well, not only that, but he literally, as he was getting them in real time, was reading the responses via text off his phone. And I'm not kidding. I'd have to go back and watch it, but I'm guessing that in a 4-minute window of him just literally machine gunning these responses to me via his phone line, off of the phone, reading them, he probably had 18 to 20 players, and most of them are in the top 50 in the world. Of course, the field is nothing but the top 100 in the world, but he did a phenomenal job. And then I kind of bridged to the top of the 11 o'clock hour on the East Coast. And then Rich, Jaime, Brandel, and Justin got in place back on the set, and they went from 11 to 11:30 live. And then we came back Friday morning. I was there in the event that they needed any redundancy from the studio. Those guys came on, carried, and then went off the air. And then I left at noon on that Friday, the building, and was told by Molly, who was there in the control room. I was in there as well with Ben Dawn, who was the lead producer, Jeff Fabian, Alan Robson. They're a great team, Joe Barrett. And it was, hey, just you're on call from now until whenever. And that's what the last 2 weeks have been.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. I think that's what a lot of people wanted to hear as well. I mean, we got to see what happened on TV, but I was just very curious because I can't imagine, other than 9/11, 2001, I don't think you had the infrastructure that you have now, obviously. I don't think you're...
Certainly not.
Right. So, I mean, I know there was Golf Channel, but there wasn't to that extent. But the ability to just put it all together and just... It was astonishing, and there's no precedent for it. I mean, there's nothing you had to like, oh yeah, I remember when this happened last time. No, you don't have that.
No, Ben, the only thing that I would compare it to in terms of the mobilization, I'm not trying to make this heroism or anything. I'm just trying to give people, because I know you're curious, and I find it interesting too. I love television.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by particularly sports television, going all the way back to when I was a kid. Anyway, the only thing I would compare it to in terms of my experience at Golf Channel, and then just talking to people like Rich and Matt, Matt Haggerty, who've been there a long time, but Rich on the air more than 20 years, is Arnold Palmer's death, which occurred on the Sunday night of the Tour Championship, leading into Ryder Cup week. So, and it's kind of eerie. I was in my bedroom. I was going to bed because morning drive was 7 a.m. that Monday morning following the Tour Championship that Rory won in 2016, that playoff with Ryan Moore. And my wife opened the door to our bedroom with our two daughters, knowing my affinity for Mr. Palmer, and said, Mr. Palmer died. And then we were the Golf Channel then, from the announcement of his passing, we were on the air for 24 straight hours. And that's the only thing that I can compare it to. And you know, it's not so much, it really isn't the people that you see. It's the people who are putting this tapestry of connective tissue of guest after guest after guest as they did. That's Courtney Holt, who's the head of player relations, and her team of Kelly Miller, and Alex Russell, who was the daughter of Mark Russell, who was the vice president of rules and competition for the PGA Tour. But this was kind of like that. And then again, that that Friday morning, That included, Mike Tirico's in place. He gets the interview with Jay Monahan following his presser that was live. Damon Hack was still on site. Eamon Lynch, Jaime Diaz were giving their thoughts with Todd, who's on that side set, and of course Brandel and it was Justin, and then Jaime went back up to the set with Rich. That was that would be the only thing that I could compare to. But you're right, 9/11. Of course, I wasn't at Golf Channel in 2001, but you're right. There was no infrastructure to execute to the degree or the depth that the company was able to do as they did 2 weeks ago, and then of course, not quite 4 years ago.
No, you guys did a phenomenal job, and I'm glad you mentioned all those people that are behind the scenes, because I know that it's not, I mean, it's not just the ones that you see on camera. It's the entire machine behind it. You mentioned Mr. Palmer, and I was going to get to that, but let's go ahead and segue into it right now. When did you meet Mr. Palmer for the first time?
I met him in the winter of 1995. It was my first season at Seminole as an assistant professional.
I was going to surprise the listeners with that. You're a former Class A professional. That I don't know how the hell you got an assistant job at Seminole of all places, but
I'll tell you very quickly.
Yeah, sure. I found that out. I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, come on.
I'll tell you exactly how. It's not that I was bereft of any ability at various things, but there are plenty of people equally or more qualified than I was. I was very lucky. I'd gotten through both at that time. The school structures to get through in the PGA of America were different than they currently are now. They're more robust. They're denser. It requires more time to get your Class A certification. But I actually got it as a member of the South Florida section. So anyway, I was at Greensburg Country Club in Greensburg, North Carolina. And the guy that was leaving, that opened up the position on Jerry Pittman, who preceded Bob Ford. Jerry was a great professional, and I think he should be in the PGA of America Hall of Fame. But nonetheless, Todd Killian was leaving, and Todd was going to become the head pro at the honors course in Chattanooga. And Todd had worked for the guy that I was working for at the time, Scott Bailey at Greensburg Country Club. So I knew before anybody that when Todd got the job, Scott was his mentor. He called Scott, let him know that he got it. And Scott knew what my objectives were. I gave Scott a list of clubs that I wanted to go to. He was the man in the Carolina section, placing guys in head jobs. I didn't want that at 26. I gave him a list, and Seminole was on the list. And anyway, Billy Armfield, who was a textile magnate in the industry, but also a member of Greensburg Country Club, was a Seminole member. And Scott called Billy, who had literally just landed off a plane at Kennedy Airport in New York from London, and said, hey, Gary is interested in pursuing the position that's opening at Seminole. Billy Armfield called Jerry. And a week later, I was sitting in the Hutton room in the clubhouse at Seminole on a Sunday late morning, interviewing for the job, and then went out and played 9 holes in a westerly wind, which is the rarest wind at Seminole, ripping about 30. And Jerry said, we're going to play 9 holes. Now, not we. I played alone. He walked with his bucket hat on, dressed in his battleship gray slacks that he wore every day, and his white Pickering hard collar, a la Mr. Hogan.
Right. And
I played 9 holes with a caddy, and just grinded my what's off to play respectfully, and I wound up getting the position. So anyway, I'm in my first season. It's that winter, and it's a Saturday morning, and it was very odd. Jerry's very fastidious, very detailed man. Not only did we vacuumed the shop at night, and then when we got there in the morning, we vacuumed it again, as if like some vagabonds broke into the shop every night and just left debris on the ground. It was very unusual.
Sure,
anyway,
yeah.
The vacuum was in the locker room, so I walked up the concrete steps to the entrance, the lower entrance, closer to the pro shop, into the locker room at Seminole, opened the door with the vacuum in my hand, and it was about 8:15 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Looked up before I had put my foot on the top step, and Arnold Palmer was sitting on the bench across from that screen door. And basically, I almost landed in his lap by tripping on that last step. He put his hand out, said, "I'm Arnold Palmer." He was playing that day with a dear friend of his, Bronson Ingram, who's a Nashville guy whose family is the biggest benefactor at Vanderbilt University. Unfortunately, Mr. Ingram got a terminal cancer not long after that. I met him there, but it was a brief interlude. Said goodbye to him that day after he played, and then saw him again. And that was about 5 weeks after I'd started at Golf Channel. I hosted a dinner at Bay Hill for the USGA's member program.
Sure.
And I sat with him and Kit at dinner. Dal Finsterwald was there with his wife. And Mr. Palmer and I went up and did a fireside chat because he's one of a handful of players in the history of the USGA that won 3 different championships that they conduct. And before we walked up, and I was the first time I had really spent literally any time with him. He said, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "Actually, I feel okay." And he said, "You'll be fine." He goes, "Just remember, nobody gives a shit what you have to say. They're here for me." And that totally, not that I wasn't really that uptight, but I mean, I was like, this guy is gold.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the man. So that was really my first interlude with him. And he was just to peel back a layer further. He was alerted before that evening by some people that my father, right after I got a Golf Channel, was diagnosed himself with a very rare form of kidney cancer, and he was terminal. And Mr. Palmer was made aware of that, didn't say anything to me. He looked out for me. I would go over, I would have breakfast with him at Bay Hill. I went to Latrobe on several occasions, was able to spend time with him. So he was an amazing, comforting person to me, beyond being, for crying out loud, the John Wayne of golf.
Right, exactly.
He was amazing. And right, the spring before, or pardon me, the fall before, 1 year before he passed, I took my younger daughter down, and had breakfast with him because he knew that she was playing some golf. We went down on a Sunday morning and had breakfast at Bay Hill. So he was a champion, Ben, of not only Golf Channel, even though from a financial standpoint, there wasn't as much bona fide skin in the game. That was his baby.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the source of pride that he had in knowing that, not just the first 24-hour sports network devoted to one sport, and now subsequently every sport has one, but golf,
right,
of all things, was able to survive. And Tiger was huge in terms of helping to pull the sled and attract, the casual fan and the sports fan to take an interest when he, it was almost simultaneously. Golf Channel preceded him professionally by a year.
Right.
But anyway, but Morning Drive was the first devoted live program by any sport to a morning slot, which is I did mornings in radio for years before I got to Golf Channel. There's a ton of money that is spent in morning radio and in morning television. And they said, we're doing this. And the NFL didn't have a morning show yet. Major League Baseball did not have a live morning show yet. The NHL did not. And the NBA did not. It was Golf Channel with Morning Drive. And he was, again, he'd get on the treadmill. And Kit told me, she's like, he now gets up a half an hour earlier so he can be on the treadmill when the show starts at 7, which we did at that time. Only 5 days a week. We were not on the weekends, and we didn't flex schedules. We were 7 to 9 Monday through Friday, and so he was amazing.
I know that Tiger, like you said, pulled the sled, but Tiger in 96, 97 doesn't have the business relationships and the corporate relationships to talk to titans of industry like Mr. Palmer. So you're right. And somebody has to start it. And it's not a network is not going to get started by a 20, 21-year-old kid. Doesn't matter who it is. It's just not going to happen that way. So.
You're exactly right. And to to be fair and to give the due credit that's deserved, Joe Gibbs, he understood the landscape of television. And then Tim Neer, who was the president of Seminole Golf Club prior to Jimmy Dunn, who I know you've had on the podcast. Yeah. Tim was the point guy for distribution to cable systems across America. And those three guys ran the weave and made it happen. But Palmer was the point man. He was the lead dog in the sled when it came to, walking into a conference room. Not only, like you said, did he already have the relationships because of his portfolio of sponsorship and corporate relationships, but he had the magnetism with all these people who ran these companies to make at least a modest investment in the wherewithal in this fledgling network. Yeah. So but Joe Gibbs and Tim were the other two guys who were just, those three guys made it happen.
I guess here's just a random question I have for you, just as a journalist. You need to be objective. You need to be able to say on a Saturday morning after a player shoots 76 and misses the cut that, he didn't look good and he doesn't have his game together. But you're going to see that player at some point down the line and have to have hard conversations, or they may have conversations with you. How do you balance the journalistic integrity, but also keep the relationship?
I think what you do is, first of all, a tone is really important. And I think that particularly now with the way that a lot of us, and I'm not doing it as much now, and I'll explain why in a little bit with respect to the consumption of social media. There's not a lot of tone in conversation now because a lot of communication is not audible. It is electronic. And I think that when you do take the time, and that's why I've always loved talking to people like you. I'd much rather have a conversation that is, where you can measure your own tone, but also be able to digest the tone that you're getting from the person or people that you're talking to. I think tone's really important. And I think in golf, when you're talking about somebody's performance, I don't have any earthly idea day in and day out what is going on in the lives of these men and women when they go out and prepare to play competitive golf alone. They are not, you can't hide a left guard when you're teeing off at the Valspar or the Dell match play that should be going on right now or would be going on right now. So tone's really important. And I don't do this habitually where you issue the disclaimer saying, listen, I don't know what their state of mind was when they got to the golf course in the morning, but you try to be sensible and you also have to be receptive to the point of view of other people, because the thing that I struggle with and what really motivated me very much to pursue the job at Golf Channel was after doing so many years of radio, was that I was finding that if you did not talk in a way that it was, I'm right, you're wrong, that you were considered to be, there was
you're
a
weak.
weakness to your presentation. And other than empirical data, everything else is subjective. Now, there are certain things that overwhelmingly you would say, well, of course, you're right about that. But by and large, especially when it comes to performance, look, if somebody goes out and hits 7 greens and it's 3 fairways and has 34 putts, they had a really bad day. And that's not hard to draw that conclusion. But I think it's, all right, try to put it in, don't try to take every single round and shove it in a vacuum and then just railroad these declarative statements of, he stunk today, I don't understand what's wrong with him, why, this, that, and the other. And then what you try to do is gather, whether it be on the front end or the back end, whether it be not directly. I don't infringe upon players for the most part in the middle of a competitive component, meaning from Thursday to Sunday, I leave players
Sure.
alone.
Yeah.
There may be something that is an ancillary thing that I may want to just get a thought on, or set up of the golf course, or hey, what did you anyway. But what you try to do is be to have your mind as illuminated as it can possibly be to where that certain player may be, whether it be a coaching change, whether it be, again, personal stuff is just that. That's their lives. And that's it. I'm not saying that this is some, arduous challenge that we face every day, but I go back to what I said in trying to answer the question is I think tone's really important. And don't, I know that I'm guilty of this sometimes. I really do. And I have to check myself is don't act like you know more than you know, and don't try not to be pious and try not to be too righteous, particularly in this game that is so fleeting and so damn fickle. And I think that over time, players who I think consume more than they say they do, some don't at all, but I think by and large, look, we're all curious to varying degrees of what others think of us, whether it be personally or professionally.
Of course.
We are. I mean, we just are. We're social creatures by nature. So just by virtue of that, we're going to be curious about the thoughts of other people about whether our personalities, our work performances. So, and I think that, what you do is, again, try to know as much as you can know, and then present your position in a way that is not declarative and also is very open to the viewpoints of others. I can't tell you, Ben, the number of times I've sat and said whatever it is that I think, and it's not some, just profound thing. And then I'll listen to what Jaime Diaz has to say, and I'll go, I hadn't thought of it that way. Not in 1,000 years, nor could I have expressed it that way. And that's why it's such a damn joy to have the chance to work with, somebody like that, or Damon Hack, or Matt Adams. So, and that's why, you love golf, and you're a good player. I'm a competent player at 53. But I do know that they're aliens. What they do it's not, but that applies to Steph Curry. That applies
to
best,
they're the best
Patrick Mahomes. Yes, they have made their way through a siphon that gets more narrow and has less oxygen to come out the other side to sit on the summit of physical performance globally that I've always marveled at. I've always been curious about and awestruck by. Doesn't mean that I have to love them as people, but I do find what athletes do at the highest level damn amazing.
One of the things that I find fascinating is that whether it's, not singling out Golf Channel, it's just basically us as golf fans, which I think, even though you're on the side of presenting in a journalist manner, you are golf fans. You have to be to work to be a Golf Channel, I would imagine. And we're so intent on giving our opinions about whether or not Rory is going to win at Augusta, or Spieth is going to complete his Grand Slam, or when Spieth going to get his act together, or is Tiger going to beat Jack, and what if he does beat Jack, and is he better? All this stuff that we are just flooding social media with, flooding TV time with, that doesn't help the player. That, as to your point, they're listening to some of it. That the questions they get have to do with this. It doesn't help them achieve the things that we as golf fans actually want to see.
I could not agree more. And to that point,
to finish my thought,
sure.
We talk so much about, is Tiger going to do this, and Spieth, and I wouldn't blame Spieth if he became less visible in online, or he became less likely to sit down and have a 20-minute conversation about what's going on in his life. So how do we cover it without ruining it?
Whew. I think, again, Look, you have, in terms of, that's such a principled question that you've just asked me. You've asked me something that is rooted in good intentions. And I'm not saying that a lot of people who either cover golf, love golf, whether it's, old media, new media, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
have malicious intent.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
No, I know you're not. I know you're not. I think that is one of the most fascinating things that I, honest to God, find about professional golf is that, and I've asked this of several players, and at some point, for whatever it's worth, I mean, I'm trying to compile a something that is focused enough that will construct a book about various things that make golf as particular as it is. And one of the things, Ben, and I've talked to athletes from other sports about something that you're striking upon, and it's not only what we do week to week, month to month, and year to year with respect to the assessment of, can he do it? Can he get back? Is he done? Is he back? Is we also do it, which to me is why golf is such an extraordinary challenge of achievement now, with the ability of people's opinions to be put in the ether in a real-time basis. We ask them to talk about their performance in the middle of competitions.
Oh yeah.
And I've talked to Rick Barry about this. I've talked to Jay Billis about this. And I'm looking forward to talking to athletes in other sports about this very thing. And that is, can you imagine that if, and again, you can go, well, again, that's why it's different. Yeah. But if Steph Curry goes 8 for 9 in the first quarter and Steve Kerr goes, great quarter, now go home, sleep on it. And before you leave, I want you to shower, and then you're going to talk to the media. You're going to tell them how good that first quarter was, akin to shooting 63, and how you're going to back it up tomorrow in the second quarter. And I've talked to Webb Simpson about this when he won the Players, because when he shot that 63 and he put such distance between himself, and it had been a while when he had won, and I said to him, I said, Webb, I'm watching in the presser after the 63, and again, it's what we do, and there's no malicious intent. What would this mean? You haven't won in a while. What would this mean in terms of the anchor ban? And you've got a 7-shot lead. We're trying to get them to a place that they haven't gotten to yet, and that is the place of the finish line and the achievement, and it's over and the bow is on it, but they're not there. And he said, Gary, it was so hard to go home, to not watch television, and he's a golf geek.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of the guys who, when he doesn't compete professionally, will go down to Eagle Point in Wilmington with some buddies and play for 3 days. He loves playing golf. And he said it was hard not to watch Golf Channel. And then I got up the next morning, and I know that I'm not teeing off till 2:45, and I called Paul Tesori, and I'm like, we got to go get coffee now. And Paul's like, you got to relax, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, but Rick Barry said to me, he goes, this game is so hard mentally. He said, I don't know how these guys do this. I don't know how they're asked to talk about things that have not even happened yet. And it's the middle of a competition, and they have to go sleep. And you talk about flow states and ebbs and flows, and boy, he looks good today. Well, okay. Then he wakes up the next day, or she. So you're right. We are, and again, this is another thing. And I asked Jack Nicklaus this in the press room the week of the Masters in 2016. I said, Jack, do you think that social media has an impact on performance? And he said, yes, I do.
Oh yeah.
And then he started giving, which only he can, this very thoughtful and really interesting position on the fact that when he played, he was impacted by the thoughts of Dan Jenkins, Jim Murray, Furman Bisher, and there was one other, and it'll come to me. It might have been Ron Green Sr. I think that's who it was. And he said, but here's the thing, Gary, I knew that when my round was over, I didn't have to worry about it. Like if I made bogey on 17, I didn't walk to the 18th tee with potentially things that would fester or get into the mainstream of my mind about how people, literally, including media members and fans, were saying what a sloppy bogey, what a soft bogey, and he's walking to the 18th tee. And I think that applies to football players. If you're an LSU receiver and you go over the middle and you drop a pass on an in route that could have been a touchdown, that guy's going to go to the sideline. It's now 4th and 10. He's not thinking about people just roasting him on Twitter in real time. Social media impacts performance. I absolutely believe that it's true. And Jack said, all I had to do was make sure that Barbara kept the newspaper away from me the next morning.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah. I'm just thinking about their whole thing. They're playing professionals. They're all about staying in the present. And the first thing that happens as soon as they go off the golf course is someone takes them out of the present into, what are you going to do tomorrow? How do you need to do this? How do you need to do that? Or how do you win? The thing that I would love to see go away, and has absolutely nothing against anyone that does it, is, and Balionis or anyone else.
Sure.
But when you're got that player in the post-round interview and you got them in front of the screen and you got all their scores and looking at this, looking at that, instead of saying, what worked for you today and what are you going to do tomorrow, why not say something like at Memorial, say, hey, Adam Scott, or hey, Rory McIlroy, we're at Jack's place. Tell me about the first time you met Jack Nicklaus. Wouldn't that be more interesting to hear these big professionals, these big stars in the PGA Tour, turn into like little kids telling about the first time they met a golfing hero? I'd much rather hear that story about a Tim Herron or a Hideki or whoever. I want to hear how you met Jack for the first time. I don't care how you shot 68 because I can look that up and I already saw it. And what are you going to do the next day to shoot another 68? Do the same shit you just did today. Done. But I'd love to hear you, tell me, or that could be done any event, what's the first time, anything. You can get all creative, do whatever you want to, but I'd love to see more human moments and maybe we should expect more of that. I'm not saying personal moments. I don't want to know like, hey, so last time you're playing in Vegas, give me a good story about the club you're at. And, I don't need that. That's personal, but I'd like a little more of a human moment. I don't want numbers at that point, I guess. It's
indicative of kind of where we are in terms of the way that news moves now, that it's hot takery, it's gasbaggery, which again, listen, I remember the first time I was called that, it was by Bob Raceman of the Daily News, who's the media columnist, still is, right, when I was working at Sirius XM, and it's soundbite stuff. And I think that, again, part of it is the mechanics. I know this, and this is not in defense of the execution or the line of questioning that generally does happen in situations like that. But I do know this, particularly on the back end of a broadcast, whether it's Lance Barrow at CBS or Mark Loomis at Fox or Tommy Roy at NBC, you got 90 and they're in your ear and they're going, you got one, and you click follow. And by the way, you're probably right up against a hard out at 6 on the East for local news. Anyway, what you're saying is, and I think that, if stuff like that, hopefully stuff like that is being gathered by, especially for the headline players each week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays in media sessions in advance of the event. But you're right. And I think what happens, and that's why I always thought, and to our producer's credit, early on at Morning Drive, we started a thing called Champions Tuesday, and we were very fortunate early on in 2011, in the infancy of the program, and most of them were phone interviews. We would get winners on every tour on Tuesday. Yeah. And when you get somebody, when they've gone through the car washes, as they're called, of the media responsibilities and the immediate aftermath of a win, first of all, by and large, for the lion's share of players, it is a mind-blowing experience to win a professional golf tournament. And you can say, oh, stop. Well, look, Ricky Fowler has been doing this full time since 2010. He's won 5 times. Okay. It is mind blowing.
Yeah.
And, you know, for them to be able to get their bearings and be a little bit reflective, if you give them 24 hours, whether it's at home or in a hotel room at the event the next week, there is an introspection that you will get from a player 24 or 36 hours after a win that was really enjoyable. We're starting to do it. As a matter of fact, on Golf Central on Mondays, I started hosting at the beginning of the year, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays on Golf Central. And we've had, you know, when Webb won the Waste Manager, we had him on Monday. We had Nick Taylor on when he won at Pebble Beach. We've had a few others. And as a matter of fact, even the European Tour winners that we've gotten on Sundays following the European Tour that precedes Morning Drive, like we got Lee Westwood on in the Middle East when he won I think he won in Abu Dhabi. And it was 90 minutes after he won, not 90 seconds. And, you know, you were able to kind of, it was like he was done. He was kind of exhaling, and you could go places that, unfortunately, Amanda does an excellent job, and Steve Sands and people like that.
Yeah.
It really is. You may have 3 bullets in the holster, and you may not even be able to empty the chamber before, you know, you got Lance or Tommy barking at you, 10, 9, and it's not 9 to go to another interview. It's 9 to black.
Right.
And it's Wesh News in Orlando letting you know, whatever the hell has happened in Orange County.
Right. No, no, exactly. And yeah, and I'm not singling them out. I guess it's more just the machine that I understand. They got 10 seconds to nothing. They can't get into a big story, but I guess I'm just thinking about, you know, if I want to get the stats and the specifics, there are places I can go to get that. I go to ShotLink, I go here, I go there. I guess we're still talking about social media, and then I'm going to ask this one thing, then we'll get off it. But, you know, coronavirus has actually, you know, in a certain sense, I know it's awful what we're dealing with, and a lot of people are dealing with a lot of serious issues, but it's kind of narrowed the gap between the PGA Tour player, LPGA Tour, whatever, the PGA Tour player and the fan. You know, because we're all stuck at home, and we have to do this social distancing thing. And I know, you know, Rory's home gym is going to be a little bit more extensive than mine, and cleaning out my garage is probably not going to be as exciting as Poulter's garage. That psychopath with all those shoes and the cars and shit. But it allows us to connect, and you know, I'm starting to see that happen, and I know we need to stay safe and try and help less fortunate people. But what are some of the things that you wouldn't mind seeing some of the players do during this time to maybe humanize themselves, grow the game, grow their connection to the fans? Like if you could just kind of make a blanket like advice to some of these guys and gals, like what can you do? Because it's a really, in the wake of just a really horrible thing, it's a really interesting time. It's almost like everyone can reset and change their way, so to speak.
Well, I'll give you an example, and this is on the, this is really on the top end of the food chain from somebody who I've mentioned his name already. What Steph Curry did today is next level stuff. Steph Curry did an Instagram Q&A with Anthony Fauci. And among the people who viewed it, I think they said during the live presentation of it, 50,000 people watched it.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it was more. I thought I saw 50,000. Among them was President Obama, and his buddy Andre Iguodala was watching it. Anyway, that's next level stuff. That is somebody who, first of all, has a tremendous affinity for the game of golf. And it's funny, I've been watching Steph since he was 7 years old because I was in Charlotte when Dell was a member of the Charlotte Hornets and watched him play at Charlotte Christian and Davidson right there. And anyway, Steph has got a very curious mind, a lot like Rory McIlroy does. And it's rooted in in the curiosity for personal advancement and personal growth, which by extension, I would imagine is only going to make his family unit healthier, and then really a lot of other people's lives, better, like he's doing with the Howard Golf program. But stuff like that, I think that players, and this is not about editorializing about who's right, who's wrong, who's done wrong, who's been, it's not about that. It's about the curiosity of where are we and what we're doing. But I think an example of first of all, what they're all doing by raising their engagement with people, whether it be, putting out videos or
push-ups or chipping,
or whatever,
stuff.
and Rory and Justin Thomas and Billy Horschel and those guys. And I'm actually not. I haven't been consuming a lot of social media for almost a month and a half. But anyway, I think that if guys like that go to the next level, and what I mean by that is, you know what, you can now with Zoom, Rory, you know what, he's become a real thoughtful voice. In forget the PGA Tour, in golf, in the game of golf, and say, you know what, get 3 or 4 other people and do not necessarily a Brady Bunch. You don't need 9 boxes, whether it be 3, 4, and you know what? Talk about stuff. Talk about things that I'll tell you, things that I would be curious about. I mentioned about Webb Simpson. He plays golf when he's not playing golf for a living. I'd love to know what Justin. Where's Justin Thomas not played? What is on Justin Thomas's bucket list?
Yeah.
What and Rory's been doing this, sharing books that he's reading, and right. I've actually read several of the ones that he has, and I've found them to be very interesting, including digital minimalism, but stuff like that to say, you know what, you guys ever been to Bandon Dunes? And I guarantee you that 40 to 45 out of the 50 players in the top 50 in the world haven't.
Right.
That is the number one retail golf destination in the United States, and among, I would guess, I don't know, I'd have to call up Matt Janelle. It's probably top 5 in the world. But anyway,
he's probably there right now. He's probably figured out a way to get there right now.
No, I know. No, he's not. I went for a walk with distance between us at first light yesterday morning. He's at home. But anyway, I think that learning more about them in hey, what do you guys like? You're at home. And again, this is not being voyeuristic. Right. I don't know what are their indulgences. I mean, whether it's ice cream or pizza or TV shows. Right now, we're all curious. My wife and I plowed through Curb Your Enthusiasm. I'm like, now what do we do? Really. Well, thank God, Ozark season 3 is getting released tomorrow, March 27th.
There you go.
And I will be undisciplined, like a lot of us are, and not go, take it easy, 2 a day, maybe 1. No, what I'll do is I'll probably wind up watching 5 in one day. But things like that, where there is a, connect to each other.
Who's the last
and
member?
By 1 degree of separation, connect these people who patronize you by watching you, following you, maybe buying your products, showing, brand loyalty. And then if you really want to, expand, your horizons, you know what, get somebody on from, whether it be, hey, like Rory had Jay Monahan on, and this was before all of this. I had him on his podcast, and Rory's got a platform with that podcast. I'd love to know. And Rory's a huge UFC fan. He's a huge NBA fan. Rory McIlroy and Carson Daly could get Adam Silver on.
Of course.
And these guys, whether it be XL Sports and Mark Steinberg runs that golf division, cross-pollinate your athletes and let them share time for all of us to learn commonalities about preparation, about the impact of social media on performance. Let them talk about things that you and I may speculate about, may have, maybe a decent read on, and find out more about them. Because I will say this, Ben, I do think in listening and being around a lot of these players, and I'm not going to, sit here and good guy. No industry is filled with a bunch of good people up and down the line. But I think golf showed itself well on that Friday morning as these guys were going in, whether it be Kevin Kisner. Kevin Kisner is an interesting dude.
Yeah.
And he's brutally honest. I've done a few events with Kevin. I did a junior event with him, and this was just as a sidebar. He got up in front of the 54 of the best juniors in the world at the Junior Invitational at Sage Valley.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, "Hey, guys, it's great having you here. This is my club. Live, just down the road in Aiken." And he said, "But I just want you to know that 64 played off in the Monday qualifier at the Houston Open. Get you some of that. Many of you are not going to play this game for a living." And I went, "What an icebreaker."
That's awesome.
But Kevin Kisner is gold. Kevin Kisner is unvarnished, brutal truth. And guys like that, this is an opportunity for golf to showcase people like him. And there are others that have
Max Homa.
First of all, we all know.
Homa.
Yeah, Max Homa. Max is another one. Graham McDowell people know his thoughtfulness.
Yep.
Graham McDowell right now, here's an example of how interesting it would be to have a conversation with someone like him. This is somebody who has plowed his way back to relevancy with respect to his world ranking and touching the light of the Ryder Cup radar of Padraig Harrington by virtue of winning an event in Saudi Arabia, winning last year in Punta Cana. But here's the other thing about Graham McDowell. Graham McDowell is a restaurant owner.
I was going to say that. I was just going to say that. I was literally.
Ben, who, by the way, one is within there's a cart path from the entrance of Lake Nona to Nona Blue. And people know that if you've been to Ponte Vedra and been to the stadium course, if you stayed at the Marriott, you don't need to Uber to Nona Blue. You walk there. This is somebody, and by the way, just to extend that to another layer of the impact of this on, and look, everybody, whatever they do, is impacted by this. Everybody. But what I do push back on is the frivolity that people think that golf is. Golf is a multi-billion-dollar industry that employs a ton of people at all different levels, including Graham McDowell's brother, who works maintenance at Royal Port Rush. They're shuttered right now. So Graham McDowell could give you 90 minutes of really, really thoughtful, deep probing discussion about the impact. And this is not a telethon, but what I'm saying is that these players they're interesting. They've led lives of a singular pursuit that have only been probably possible with tremendous sacrifice on the parts of a lot of other people who never swing the club. And at this time, I think these videos, like what Tony Finau did with his wife the other night, made me smile.
Yeah.
Made me smile. I think that's been a benefit of this situation. And I haven't seen what other sports are doing, but we actually, on the Golf Central hit that I did today with Todd Lewis, we actually showed the Mike Trout, kind of semi-flop shot from the top of his cascading staircase right into that one red Solo Cup.
Yeah. I saw that.
The floor below. I think all this stuff, it's a diversion, it's a respite, and it's a tapestry that I think can be helpful for all of us.
Oh yeah. The thing is that people, casual followers of golf that don't really quite get, the Korn Ferry Tour guys, mini tour guys, collegiate players, they just assume that if you say you're a professional golfer in the PGA Tour, that you have those, private flights and everyone's taking care of stuff for you and you're loaded and that really is an interesting one. I'd be very fascinated to talk to Graham McDowell because on one side he's a major championship winner, has played all over the world, but now he's also a small business owner that has to probably figure out how he's going to keep waiters and waitresses paid. So there's both ends of the spectrum there, which would be kind of interesting to get to. So yeah, if you talk to him, you got to ask that'd be a fascinating one right there.
Well, and like you said, Ben, and I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, this is, and again, that's what we do. We play the hits. We talk about stars. We talk about people who are leading golf tournaments. You win a golf tournament now on the PGA Tour, it's $1 million and change, $1.5 million, 2.7 if it's the players. But here's an example. I don't know anything about him. Brett Stedmeyer was 75th on the Korn Ferry Tour money list last year. And why did I mention? Well, because that, as you know, conditional status. Yep. There is some oxygen with respect to starts. Brett Stedmeyer last year made $83,000. He's 36 years old. He went to the University of Florida. I talked to Brett Stedmeyer for an hour right now about what he's doing.
Yeah.
What it is that he's thinking about, how he's occupying his time. You give everybody a sense of how does that $83,000, and I'm not trying to probe into his personal finances, but a lot of these guys bunk up together. They may, share cars together. They're trying to get the cheapest flights they can. I'd spend an hour talking to him right now.
There's just all sorts of interesting conversations that can happen. Well, let's pivot and tell some fun stories about some of the things. I know we're solving world's problems right now. We're this close to getting a stimulus package. Oh, there you did that. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Tell me about one of the perks of your gig is you are on site at PGA Tour events, and I'm guessing you've wandered yourself into a pairings party where there's some live music being played, or maybe a pro-am. They need an extra guy, and you slip into one of those. Give me a story about one of those spots that you fell into, and you're looking around and saying, how the hell did I get here?
You know what? And this is, look, I'm very, very, fortunate to work in the toy department of life.
Yeah, we know you don't deserve it. Yeah, we know you don't deserve it. It's fine.
No, but yes, I do not. Very undeserving. That is now that is empirical data. I do not deserve this. I've played in a fair number of PGA Tour pro-ams, but in 2012 I was invited. I was very lucky. Well, here's what happened. Richmond, which is the conglomerate that Johann Rupert oversees, that is his business empire, and that includes some of the great brands globally, particularly when it comes to timepieces, Cartier, IWC. Anyway, Richmond bought Peter Millar, and so Peter Millar is part of their portfolio. I've worn Peter Millar clothing starting with the first season of Morning Drive in 2011. Well, in the aftermath of that acquisition, Scott Mahoney, who still runs Peter Millar, said, why don't you come down and play a place where you used to work at Seminole? Johan would like to, play around a golf with you, watch his golf channel. So this was the spring. This was March of 2012. So I have one of those lunar eclipse days where I actually posted a score. I made 6 birdies that day.
Whoa.
And Scott and I walked in, Johann Rupert, and Bob Ford, of all people. We closed them out. We started on 10. We closed them out with 3 to go. By the way, Bob made a 2 on 9, the par 5, our last hole of the day, and basically called it. It was 238. Even though the match was over, I still give him credit for the shot.
Holy shit.
I said, what are you going to do here? And he said, well, I'm going to hit this 5-wood, and I've just got to try to kind of saw it between those 2 palm trees. And it was a back right pin, and he hit this little Chardonnay cut that hit the middle of the green, 3 hops, and disappeared. And I went, Jesus God. Anyway, so during the course of that day, Johan he's not just the godfather to so many South African golfers. He loves golf, loves to compete, loves to play. And when it was over, he said to me, he goes, the fact that you didn't even ask about the Dunhill Links gives you a reasonable shot to one day maybe even play in it, which is the equivalent of playing in the Pebble Beach
yeah.
AT&T Pro-Am, which is the Rota. It's a fall event on the European Tour. It's St. Andrews, Carnoustie, and Kings Barnes. So I just kind of I tried to act composed and left, not thinking, yeah, I'm going to play there someday. Well, I got an invitation, and I went and I played in the Dunhill Links in the fall of 2012. And Ben, it was the most obscene display of decadence that I have ever seen in my life. This is not a joke. Every single solitary time I walked in my room at the Old Course Hotel, stayed there, there was at least 2 gifts on my bed.
Oh,
I'm like, where are they? How are they getting in my room? I don't care. They can keep coming. And it included when I was going to miss the cut miserably with my professional partner, who was 19 at the time, Hayden Porteous, who is, doing okay on the European Tour. He was 19 at the time. Our last round in our Rota was Carnoustie. And by the way, flew on a helicopter from the entrance to the Old Course Hotel up the Scottish coastline and landed at Carnoustie 12 minutes later. But when we made the turn, Scott Mahoney, who was kind of, my consigliere, he was also there playing. He was playing with, who was he playing with? Tunjay Jaidi, who was a great guy. We actually were paired with him the last day. So Scott, he's going to miss the cut too. And there was a big backup on what was the first tee. We started on 10. He said, "How are you getting home?" I said, "Scott, I've got a flight tomorrow. I've got a flight tomorrow night." And I had it was Edinburgh to Gatwick to Kennedy to Orlando.
Oh God.
He said, "Oh, okay." On the next tee, he comes over to me and goes, "You're all set. Be in the lobby of the hotel at 11 a.m. on Sunday." We missed the cut.
Right.
And so I put my hand out. I meet this gentleman. I'm not going to say his name, and proceeded to get on his plane at the air station right across from the estuary that separates the Old Course and what used to be a British air station, which has been decommissioned.
Right.
There's some private aircraft can still fly out of there, and flew on a G5.
Shit.
But back, we were supposed to have to refuel in Nova Scotia, but the jet stream was so good, we zipped right into Long Island in about 4 hours and 10 minutes, right from St. Andrews, and had a nice lunch on the plane, and then my wife just had to get me a flight from LaGuardia to Orlando, and I didn't care if it was 2 days later.
Well, you've done it. I don't know how far we are into this episode, but everyone hates you now. So good job.
I know.
Good job.
I know.
That's okay.
I
did. I put you in that spot. I thought you were going to say, I listened to Darius Rucker play some songs, and I got a gift bag. But no,
I did that too at the CBS Charity Classic.
Here we go. I'm just digging you a hole, and you're just jumping in and spreading it over your face.
Look, you've already said the most factual thing. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve any of it.
That's okay. No, you got to take that shit, man. If someone says, get on my flight, hey, yeah, absolutely. How were the peanuts? Peanuts or pretzels on that flight?
The flight attendant, and I'm not joking, there was one.
This is great. I'm actually keep setting you up to dig yourself deeper, and you still haven't figured that out yet, and you're still doing it.
There were no peanuts. I think we started with cured meats and some really good cheeses.
Wow.
And then we just went, and then we just escalated from there.
You're a handsome man. That's good for you. That's really good. All right, so let's see here. You've kind of answered a couple of the little, I was going to say someone in the golf world that really lived up to your expectations when you met them. If you take Palmer out of it, someone anyone fits that mold? Someone that really, when you met him, you're like, wow, that is as advertised, that guy. Or gal.
I'll tell you somebody who, and this is not something that has been an enlightenment in the last year because he won the U.S. Open. I was in a position 6, 7 years ago. He had won the Valspar, Gary Woodland. He had not yet won what is the Barracuda now. He had one win. And anyway, I found myself with him in a social situation that extended beyond an evening. It was a weekend with some other friends, and he and his now wife Gabby were part of it. And I thought, and still do, I think Gary Woodland's one of the most solid people that I've met in sports and in my career. He is, he's not only, a complete, sports junkie. He's a bona fide, athlete. I think sometimes we confuse fitness with athleticism.
Right.
And that included, it was over the course of this time that I was with him, shot baskets, threw a football, and went rope climbing. But forget all that stuff. Gary Woodland, who was, again, he had won on the PGA Tour, but he didn't have 250 cuts and a massive pension.
Right.
He was at that time. Gabby was not even his fiance. Gabby's a great athlete too. Gary Woodland is the real thing. I was like, God, what a good dude. And look, when you find common interests like sports, and I've always loved college basketball, not only being born in the state of North Carolina, but spending a lot of years covering the ACC. I love talking to him about playing college basketball, but forget that. Just talking to him about all different types of stuff. He's the real thing.
Yeah, I went to Kansas, so I've spent every summer of my childhood out of Kansas. So yeah, I've met him. It was, I think I've told this story before on the podcast, but I don't know if I told you about. I got to know his college coach, Ross Randall, down here in Palm Beach at Quail Ridge, and it was just random. Like I thought it would be a bright idea when I was 19 years old when I transferred over to Kansas. Like, hey, let's find out if I could walk onto the golf team, and that because you're 19 and smart. And,
sure. Yeah.
And he politely said, hey, enjoy your time here and good luck. And but yeah, we're pretty good. We're
all stuck up here.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we won a Big 8 conference without you. We'll probably do the same thing this year. But fast forward 20 years later, I'm talking to a buddy of mine at the club, and he's telling me about this guy he's working with that used to be the coach at Kansas. I'm like, are you talking about Ross Randall? He's like, how in the hell do you know that name? So I tell that story, and finally I get to meet him and get to know him. And, he was watching me, play a couple times. He's like, wow, if you could do that shit 20 years ago, I might have put you on the team. But, fast forward, his widow, Linda, she listens to the podcast, and she's like, hey, KU's playing one of those, holiday silly season, like 4-team college basketball little invitationals down in Miami. Do you want to go? I'm like, yeah, sure. And she's like, great, you're driving. I'm like, okay, fine. And we get there, and Gary and Gabby are there, and meet him for the first time. Oh, nice to meet you. And what does Linda do? Ben, tell Gary the story of how you tried to walk onto the Kansas golf team. And I'm like, really? You're making me do this? So I had to tell that story to Gary Woodland while he's kind of smiling and laughing and giving me the time of day, saying, who the hell is this idiot? And like, really, you tried to do that? But yeah, he does seem like an extremely solid person. And yeah, I think also you don't know him until you probably talk to him and listen to him do interviews, because he always looks so intense and just not pleased with things on the golf course. That's always been my sense about him on when you see him when you see it televised. He just doesn't really look pleased.
He's got a not in a nasty way, but he's an athlete. He's got a chip.
Yeah.
Athletes who if you're someone like him who again, he wanted to play basketball at Kansas, and the culture there because you went there, Kirk Heinrich plays basketball at Kansas.
Yeah.
Gary Woodland does not. He plays college basketball at Washburn. But when you're a kid who grows up in Wichita, and you're damn good at that sport, you got a chip. And I think that manifests itself in the way that he he comports himself, and that goes beyond what you think his face looks like. He walks like somebody who is, first of all, he walks like an athlete. He's got a saunter to him that is, he is, chin out, chest out. I'm going to, I'm going to present myself in a way that, just so you know, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, I think that's right. And it's easy for me to say, Rory, but I will say, with respect to him, he is the real thing.
Yeah.
He is somebody who, considering his upbringing as an only child whose parents, did everything they could to provide him with every opportunity to pursue the dream that was his. He has qualities that are very unusual. Forget only children who don't necessarily become high achievers. I'm talking about just only children. He is, the first time I spent time with him, he had melted down at Augusta in 2011, and I spent more than a half a day with him doing a thing for Morning Drive. I caddied for him in the Pro-Am at Memorial in 2011. It was his second event after that. He had played in Charlotte, and everyone was like, "What was he like? What was he like?" And I said, "He's a great listener." Now, if you're a great listener, that means you're unselfish. It means that you're inclined, and reflexively, you are thinking about either the other person or other people in your company. And I was very struck by that. That hadn't changed. He's got a very curious, thoughtful mind. He's got great intentions. And I told his father, I saw his father about 7 or 8 weeks ago, and I've been around Jerry too, and Rosie, and they're wonderful people. Every time I see Jerry McElroy, the first thing he always says to me is, "How's Julie and the girls?"
Yeah.
Because I was over at the Grand Slam of Golf in 2011, because he had won that U.S. Open, and my wife wound up dancing with him late at night at the nightclub at the hotel. And anyway, they're great. Anyway, but I said to him, I said, you should be really proud of him, and I know you are, but because he's not advancing himself to advance himself. He's advancing himself from an intellectual standpoint and from a personal growth standpoint that is going to make his marriage in all likelihood healthier. And in turn, when he and Erica have a family, and that, I never talk golf when I'm around him. I'm not around him much. The last time I was around him of any note was last year in Rhode Island when he went and played in that CBS thing for Brad. And I walked 9 holes with him, and all we did was talk about kids in high school. And he doesn't have children, but I have children
Right.
who are in high school, and that's all we talked about.
It almost feels like he realizes that he wants to measure himself against how he progresses as a person, as a role model, as an athlete, and another extra majors or another extra wins, that's not going to get him there. And money's not going to get him there, and all that.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. He is first of all, and this is something that I think a lot of people and people in golf do feel this and have this. He really does have a sense of gratitude, but that gratitude is being exercised in a way that he's advancing himself in terms of trying to understand things, but by virtue of relationships, including one that is somebody that you've spent time with, Jimmy Dunn.
Yeah.
Jimmy's sons are roughly of Rory's age. They got along well early on, which in turn fostered a relationship with Rory and Jimmy that allowed Rory to be more enlightened to corporate America. But he didn't just take advantage of it in terms of saying, well, I can tap into that when it comes to this. But no.
Right.
I've watched the way that he has tried to understand, like, human healthcare and the American healthcare system. And I had a conversation with him and a guy that works with Optum, who is one of his, a guy named Jeff Rhodes, who was a guy, when Rory introduced me to him, he said, this is this is the smartest guy who ever graduated from Harvard Business School. I said, no, that's not true, because my dad went to Harvard Business School. So that right there is a lie. But anyway, Jeff Rhodes is a young man who is a brilliant guy, obviously. But that's the kind of, he doesn't waste time. He's a productive person. Forget production of top fives. I'm talking about, take the day, make something of the day.
Yeah.
And not just selfishly. He's a damn gift.
Yeah.
to Jay Monahan and the PGA Tour
God,
professional golf.
Oh shit. Yeah. Well, and it's kind of like and this is kind of this is the first time we're talking about Tiger. The reason I'm bringing it up is that, and this kind of hit me, is that it's always been, for the last however long, it's 10, 15, whatever it is, it's like Tiger going to catch Jack, 18 majors, and that's all we talk, we got to measure that. We got to make sure that we stand on one side or the other of, is Tiger going to catch Jack? Is he better than Jack? Is Jack better than Tiger? And maybe Rory's the guy that's going to say, hey, I am not going to be defined by a couple numbers on a record book. That is not going to make me a better person. It may make me better in the record books, but who is that really for? So maybe our target, or maybe their targets, are going to be like, I want to be a more well-rounded person, because that's what matters, not some number. And maybe that's a lesson to be learned by seeing what Tiger had to do in his life to get to that point. Tiger seems a hell of a lot more happy with life right now. And sure, he wants to get to 18, but is that the end all be all? I don't know.
Yeah, Ben, look, Tiger Woods will be forevermore one of the most curious, fascinating studies of a global athlete in the history of mankind. I mean, he just will be. He's a genius. Geniuses are unusual, and look, and part of why there's always going to be a curiosity is that there's a strong possibility that even when he writes his own memoir, now I'm encouraged because I'm hearing the possibility that J.R. Mooringer may be the person who constructs the book. Now, J.R. Mooringer is the guy who wrote Open with Andre Agassi, one of the great sports and period biographies you're ever going to read. Now, Andre Agassi was willing to be very open. I don't know how successful JR will be. He's a great writer. When I read Open, I then read his memoir called Tender Bar, which won the Pulitzer. I've read Sutton, which is the story of Willie Sutton, the famous bank robber. I don't know, but back to Tiger. Look, there's an identity. I think that he was the most comfortable in the electronic age of being identified as Tiger Woods first, the golfer. Now, has that reaped some destruction upon him personally? It appears that it has. And again, you extrapolate what you can from various books, whether it be the Arm and Contain Jeff Benedict book, which I read, which I thought was good. And I just most recently read Michael Bamberger's forthcoming book, Tiger's Second Life. You'll like it. And again, Michael is a wonderful writer, but he's also a very sensible person. And he talks about the PEDs and he says very clearly, he says, look, if you're not interested in this subject matter, and again, it's conjecture, it's speculation. He said that the primary person that would be, the witness to this is a person who, quite frankly, is not very believable. But a lot of people in baseball do find him to be credible as a witness to whatever. The point is, Michael even said, he said, look, if you're not interested in this, go to page 94. I mean, he literally writes it in the book.
That's
and
awesome.
Then at the end of the section about it, he says, here's the thing. I'm done with this. If you thought he did before, you probably still do. If you weren't sure, you're probably likely still not sure. And if you didn't think he did, you most certainly still don't think that he did. There's a pragmatism to the way that he writes about that. And then the exploration of addiction issues, which, again, we only know what we know. But back to what you were saying is that he had a predatorial quality to him that required an unrelenting degree of selfishness, which has to be inherent in golfers to some degree,
right,
in order to do what it is that they do. Rory, I think, grew up kind of thinking that's what I want. And I'll never forget when he was introduced as a, quote, Nike athlete. It was in the Middle East. It was the beginning of 2013, and it was a laser light show. And I went, this doesn't look like him.
Right.
He's not walking as if this is his vibe. And I said at the end of last year when he won the Tour Championship and then proceeded to go satisfy an obligation for Omega to play literally the following week in Switzerland, gotten in the playoff, didn't win the golf tournament, but plowed the field. A lot more top fives, won that HSBC, was closing the gap with Koepka. That at 30, I thought coming into this year, he was in the quietest place, the most comfortable place that he's been in his professional life. And he's going to be 31 at the beginning of May. It's interesting. Justin Thomas, Koepka, and Rory all had birthdays within a week of each other. Thomas 27, Rory 31, and Koepka 30. Anyway, but I think that Tiger is comfortable and has always been as comfortable as anybody could be, saying, yeah, I'm Tiger Woods, the golfer, the brand, the empire. Whereas with Rory, it went, wait a second, golf's really important, and I'm competitive,
but I'm more than
that. And I think he's trying to exercise selfishness and grit. And I thought that he showed that at the Tour Championship by taking a haymaker in Memphis from Koepka and punching back and winning that golf tournament and saying, yeah, I heard what you said about me not winning a major
yeah. since
you've been on the PGA Tour. I'm not going to talk about it, but everybody needs fuel. But Tiger is, I don't know, Ben, look, he'll always be the most fascinating person. And then there are a lot of people, there's a fatigue to it. I understand that, but it's irrefutable. The interest level in him is so astronomically higher than it is for anybody else. And I'm sure you hear this stuff, but that's all you do. That's all you do. That's all you do. It's not, but yes, he leads. He's the top of the marquee, and he's going to be as long as he plays competitive golf to whatever, level of acumen that he does it. And I will say this, and Jaime Diaz said it before I did. He said, the Masters was amazing. And Ben, I walked every step that Sunday. I did it with Ben Dawn, who's a producer for Golf Central, one of the best producers in our building. And Ben was going to drive back to Orlando because of what happened that day, and they were going to tee off just after 9 a.m. They were going off split tees and threes.
Right.
So Ben, come on, come with me. I was going anyway. I was going to walk with that group. I said, look, just come and walk 5 holes and then get in your car. What difference does it make?
Right.
He went, all right. So we go out, and we're there on the first tee, and I have a little black leather-bound notebook that I keep notes in. I charted every shot and time-stamped it in his relation to the lead, and also was chronicling, obviously, because he was with Molinari and Finau, and obviously Koepka and DJ and Cantley were ahead of him. Anyway, Tiger bogeyed 4 and 5, and Ben was like, I'm out. I'm like, no, don't, come on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I knew anything, but he had Molinari, kind of smothered one on 7. Tiger, peeled one down the right-hand side and made birdie there. And then it was kind of game on. And then when what happened at 12,
Sure.
we were at the turning point on 13 when his back foot slipped, and that ball turned over and he gutted it in the center left side of that fairway, bottom of the fairway. Anyway, I don't know what's going to happen, but Jaime said, for all that the Masters was, for whatever reason, Zozo and the President's Cup invigorated my belief in him even more. And I went, you know what? I think you're right, because there was a freedom. There was, look, what he did, that Steely 70 that he posted and to see it and to watch it and to consume it was one of the great sporting experiences of my life. But from a zillion miles away, to see the freedom that he was releasing the club and the putter and taking it deep at Zozo and pulling the sled from the first round all the way to that final putt, and then going to the President's Cup and basically painting pictures, and every pane in that window was open. All 9 windows, low, middle, high, left, right, center. I'm like, holy crap. This is, I mean, Van Gogh is back in the building here.
Yeah. I was,
and then even Farmers, where it wasn't a great week, but it was cold and it was damp. I watched him and I went, he's visualizing stuff in the air that was still like the President's Cup. And then all of a sudden, Riviera happens. He plays the first 8 holes flawlessly, and then he hit this clunky kind of bladed wedge to the back of the 9th green. And all of a sudden, it went directly in the other direction. It's like a riddle wrapped in an enigma. I mean, It's bizarre.
Well,
I don't know.
He's on borrowed time. I mean, I've said to people, I said, look, I mean, when they're, is he Tiger? Tiger's going to win this. I said, look, I don't know anyone that has had that kind of surgeries, that many surgeries. There at any moment it's gone. Like I would not be shocked, and gosh, hope I'm wrong, but I would not be shocked if at some point he's playing some tournament and a foot slips or this happens and that's it. And just, and people probably need to be aware of that. Like every time you see him tee it up, don't expect a miracle. Be grateful for what you get to see. And if you see something amazing, remember it, because the next time he, fans a drive into the rough and it's 3 inches deep and there's a root under there or God knows what, and that's it. And instead of talking about, how are we going to measure him and is he going to win and the chasing Jack, we are getting a gift to see him a few more times and just enjoy what we have.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not. Age is one thing, but the miles on his odometer, in terms of all the procedures. And look, this is a guy who, anybody who has taken any interest at all in the way that he goes about what he does, he's maniacal in preparation. The number of balls that he has hit in his lifetime. I know the thing with VJ is what it is, but also, Ben, to me, the other thing that I'll never forget this, I was sitting in the media center at what is now the Wells Fargo Championship. This was 2008, and Trevor Immelman had just won the Masters, and Tiger finished second. And he had like a zillion putts in that final round. But anyway, Trevor had begged out of the previous week, which was New Orleans, because he was still tired. And he came to the media center. He's playing in Charlotte. His good friends in Charlotte. His parents wound up actually moving to Charlotte. Anyway, I'll never forget sitting in there, and he sat down. He looked exhausted, and he had been off for 3 weeks. Now, this was a prodigy. This was somebody who was a high achiever at a very young age, had won the Western Open. And again, it was a major breakthrough, and I don't know, pun intended, but Trevor Immelman was a very good professional golfer, and he was still very, very young at the time. This was 12 years ago. And he walked in, he sat down, and there were a few questions asked. And then he kind of went off on a tangent, and he said, he kind of put his hand on his forehead and put his elbow on the table, and he said, I got to be honest, I don't know how Tiger has done this for all these years.
Yeah.
Meaning, not only does he win, what comes with winning is accolades, money, trappings. It also comes all this exhaustive, tedious responsibility. And here is Trevor Immelman experiencing it for the first time, and it wound up being the only time. And he went, I just don't know how he does what he does.
Yeah.
There's something maniacal about somebody who how can the guy who's the best, who's done the most, still remain the most desperate? Okay, that's not normal.
Right.
It's not normal. It wasn't normal of Michael Jordan. It's not normal of him. And I admire that. And again, I don't know what toll that's taken on him, intellectually and emotionally and spiritually. Clearly, we've seen what it's done to his body physically, but very few athletes in the history of, forget our lifetimes, in time, can ever be the best for that long and never be satisfied and always be the most desperate. He should be Brett Stedmeyer.
Yeah.
That's how he acts, as if he is, if I don't make this cut for the 142nd straight time, I will not pay my mortgage. No, that's not that. You've never even cashed a check of any wins, and you have 82 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, how's that possible?
That's a drive that's both admirable and confusing and disturbing.
Yes.
Wow. I feel we
now
could,
let me ask you. So let me ask you something,
you
because you mentioned him earlier. You talked to Jack Nicklaus recently.
I did,
and I've been lucky to share some time with him over the years. Well, give me a capsule of what was that like?
Really, really special. Where it was probably it was February 5th. Not that I remember it, but yeah, it was February 5th. And since I'm down here in Palm Beach, it worked out where I got to go to his house, and just an incredible morning. I get there, and him and Barbara are doing a interview for someone I believe is attached to their foundation. So I get there, and I'm kind of waiting a little bit, but they're in the kitchen and they're offering me coffee, and we're talking a little bit, and then we go back into his office. And actually, what was really funny or just really incredible is, and I mentioned it in the preview to the episode, but my dad actually passed away on the day of the Tiger Rocco Monday playoff in the '08 U.S. Open.
Okay.
So on the drive up, I was just thinking, man, my dad would just lose his mind if he saw where I was driving to, where I was gonna go sit down and have a chat with Jack Nicklaus.
Yep.
And my dad's name was Ira, not a very common name, and I can't remember the exact context, and I can't remember who said it, but I believe it was someone there that worked for the foundation, and they said to either Jack or Barbara, they said something like, "Hey, are we still on for Ira? Is Ira still coming by, or are we still having dinner with Ira later?" And I literally got chills and kind of froze up, and I was like, "This is going to be a good day." I said, "This is going to work out good." And we went into his office, and he was great. And I tried to, I listened actually to many interviews that he'd done, and did a lot of reading, and actually listened to, I think Jaime did something at I can't remember where it was. It was like an hour and a half, like Q&A fireside chat kind of a thing that he did at some sort of an auditorium. Watched that whole thing and really tried to challenge myself to ask him something different that maybe hasn't been asked. We did not talk 86 Masters. We did not talk Tiger Woods once. And he was great, and just really human moments. And he was so humble and so honest, and just, I'm a guy that used to play golf, and now I do things with this foundation, and I'm trying to be a good father and a good grandfather, and just just very human moments. I was just really, it was just an honor, and it was fun to just be in his presence, and just a guy of such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, he's rattling off names of his Walker Cup teammates from '61, and just, it was just a lot of fun. But just a guy that got to do all these incredible things, and also someone that was doesn't like the hero worship. He doesn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. He doesn't want to be made to feel uncomfortable just because he's Jack Nicklaus.
Mm.
And
that's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I took. I'm walking out of the house. He's kind of walking me out like I just came over for like a afternoon lunch, and just, it was great. And one of the best parts was we walk out of the office, and I was told I had 30 minutes. He gave me an hour. And
Yeah.
that was, yeah. And that, and even afterwards, I just, said, I said, it's funny. I talked to a lot of friends that knew I was coming here today, and, everyone's like, oh, well, what are you going to ask? And I was like, well, that's kind of a challenge, because you don't want to ask Jack Nicklaus the same stuff he's been asked before. And he's like, oh, no, you did great. And that was fun to hear that. But one of the great things about coming out of that, out of his office, is Barbara's there, and she's like, well, how was he? What did he behave himself? And I'm like, oh, Barbara, I mean, just the raunchy jokes and the cussing, and then he got the bourbon out, and she's like, he found my bourbon. I'm like, exactly. So it's just a sweet, I mean, honestly, if you don't know, it's just a sweet old couple that live in a nice development in Palm Beach, and they're great.
Yeah.
And they're great.
And my feeling with him through the years is, first of all, I've always thought this. He used to, and actually one of the guys who was one of the lead producers for ABC's golf team, which was a great team, which I grew up. That was. I mean, my indoctrination to golf on television was Jim McKay as the host of golf. And, they had the US Open package, and they had the PGA Championship, and a handful of other events. But it was, Jack was contracted with ABC to contribute analysis, and he would play competitive rounds. He was still playing some on the PGA Tour, and he would go up in the booth, and I thought he was unmatched. And it wasn't because he was Jack Nicklaus, the greatest player, who had ever played the PGA Tour. It was because there was an insightfulness and a decisiveness to it, that he cut through all this clutter. That as somebody who's really falling in love with the game of golf, was like, what an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And again, he just played the golf course, but it was such next level stuff. And Jack Graham, who's been a longtime producer for golf and Golf Channel, was one of the producers. And, he's told me it was an extraordinary experience to literally work with this man in television, who was still, a competitive golfer. And my feeling with him, when I've had the chance, been lucky enough to do some one-on-one stuff with him, not only for Golf Channel, but also for some private function, is a lot of times, especially in like the last 5 years, he'll say to me, Gary, what are you going to ask me? And as soon as I start to tell him, he'll say, "Oh, just ask me anything." Right. I'm telling you, Ben, he does not. He'll say that, and then when he'll just ask me anything. But then what I found, like to your own experience, the 30 minutes became an hour. His competitiveness, because it's not really so much on the tennis court, let alone the golf course anymore. Okay, when I answer this, I'm gonna give you the best damn answer you could ever have, and it's not pontificating.
No.
There's a digging in thoughtfulness that it's like, whatever you ask me, I'm going to give you the best effort that I can give you. And by the way, speaking of, we were talking about athletes. Jack Nicklaus was an athlete, still is, at 80 years of age, but high school basketball player, really, was and I'm reading a book right now by David Epstein called Range. And it's basically about how generalists can thrive in a specialized world. Jack Nicklaus was not a specialist when he was a little kid. He did everything.
Yeah.
Did everything. His
Baseball,
dad, Charlie, said, you're going to, you throw snowballs and go ice skating, and you're going to play basketball, and, you want to play football, and he was a big burly kid, and he did everything. And he had a proclivity to do all of it. And he's competitive. Obviously still is, and he's competitive with the way that he uses his mind to answer questions like the ones that you asked him.
I love what's so crazy is that Jack Nicklaus has 18 majors. Didn't really realize that was a thing until someone pointed out to him that he passed Bobby Jones. So the guy that Tiger is chasing didn't really realize what he was building when he did it.
Correct.
And so I always find that kind of unique and interesting, where Tiger's chasing this number. Everyone wants Tiger to chase this number. We're so fixated on a number that the guy that said it didn't really, it just kind of, it happened. But it wasn't like I got to get to 18. I got to get to this. And of course, Jack will tell you that it's 20 because they took his U.S. Amboys.
Oh yeah.
So it's a big one.
Well,
with him.
Venturi on the CBS telecast in '86, when he holed out, made par on 18, and put his arm around Jackie's shoulder.
Yeah.
Ken Venturi said to Pat Summerall, he just won his 20th major.
Yeah. Yep.
And by the way, at Oak Hill, where he won that PGA in 1980,
yep.
after winning the U.S. Open, that was the first major I went to. I went to the opening round with my dad.
Oh, nice.
And I wanted to follow Jack. My dad said, Gary, you're not going to see any shots. The gallery would be too big. And I'm like, well, who are we going to follow? And, I'd already seen Crenshaw. It was my guy. My day was already made. But he said, why don't we follow? Fuzzy Zeller was paired with Tom Weiskopf. Fuzzy had won the Masters in 79. I went, okay. Well, Weiskopf has shot 63. And we saw my dad had a golden horseshoe shoved up his backside in life.
Right.
And he also worked his ass off. But nonetheless, and Jack shot 63, 3 groups behind. But anyway, when I went to Oak Hill in advance of the 2013 PGA Championship, I'm walking around and they've got a lot of obviously giant oak trees, and they have small little placards, little plaques that are fixed to a lot of those giant trees that ring some of the closing holes.
Yeah. And
I'm stumbling around, walking around, doing a site survey, and I just happened upon the tree that had the denoting congratulations to Jack Nicklaus on his 19th major, the 1980 PGA Championship. That tree at Oak Hill, I'm sure it still has that thing affixed to it.
Yep.
Took a picture of it.
That's awesome. Yep, that's right. 19, and then Jack in 86. Let's go ahead and finish this episode, which I have a feeling we may need to do another one at some point. But you mentioned Crenshaw, and Crenshaw was definitely one of my guys as well, because obviously, I mean, everyone remembers 95. On the heels of his mentor and coach Harvey Penick passing away, and then obviously his win at Augusta in '84. But give me a good Crenshaw story to wrap this up.
Oh boy! Well, look, there are a couple things for my love affair with sports, which began at a very, very young age, because my father was my dad was a pitcher at the University of Florida. He just didn't have quite the velocity to be a major league pitcher, but had really good stuff. Anyway, my dad was, a high school quarterback in Tampa when there were 2 high schools, Plant High School and Hillsborough High, and they play each other in front of 15,000 people. And so, and my dad was a Yankee fan. He was a Mickey Mantle fan. I grew up, we moved to northern New Jersey when I was 7. And still to this day, I'm a lifelong Yankee fan, New York Giant football fan, North Carolina basketball fan. But I have only really had one guy that I lived and died with in any sport, and it's Ben Crenshaw. And it started when my father had a subscription to Sports Illustrated, and Ben was on the cover in 1973. He won his first professional start, the Texas Open.
Yep.
And he was on the cover, and I looked at it and I went, that's that. And I love movies, and did some really very pedestrian acting when I was a kid. But nonetheless, I looked at him and I went, that's a Hollywood superstar. And so I immediately just wanted to, I was 7 years old. I did everything I could to find out anything I could about him. And he proceeded to break my heart for the very first time at the 1975 U.S. Open, when he made double on the 71st hole. And Lou Graham won that U.S. Open at Medina. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. He's just, again, I'm only 9. It's going to be fine. He's going to win 20 of these. No. Again, heartbreak after heartbreak, 79, Open Championship. And then the decade of the 80s starts, and Ben starts to contend habitually every year. at the Masters. And really, if you look at that decade in total, other than Seve, who won 2 and had more top 5s than Crenshaw, Ben was front and center year in and year out. And 84 I was a junior in high school. I had the 8802. I had the Walter Hagen. I had the muscle back irons that I had no business hitting. But I just insisted on trying to be him. And, honestly, if you look at the subsequent years after, and I'm going to get to my quick story in a moment, of winning in 84, which was, again, after all the heartbreak and all the playoff losses and regular tour events as well. 0-9, by the way, all time in playoffs, which shows you that he's the most non-confrontational person maybe ever who's done anything in the game, because he'd rather just go, why don't you just take this win? Because that's how deferential he is. Anyway, 87, 3-putted 17 on Sunday, missed the playoff with Norman, Mize, and Seve by a shot. 88 in the final group of Sandy Lyle, plays poorly, finishes well back. 89, birdies 16 and 17, goes to 18, pipes it, dumps it in the front bunker, makes bogey, misses the playoff with Faldo and Hoke by a shot. I'm telling you, Ben, I could go on and on and on. But after all of these things, and I had sent a letter or two over the course of my lifetime to him, had received a few corresponding letters back. It is now the spring of 2011. I've just started a Golf Channel. And in advance of the Masters, my coordinating producer at the time, Jeremy Davis, comes to me and says, hey, Pinehurst has reached out to us. They're interested to know if you would like to play with Ben the Monday after the Masters for the grand reopening of number 2.
Oh my
now,
gosh.
Again, to add a couple layers to this, I went to golf camp at Pinehurst number 2 when I was a kid. My father and I, when my parents retired to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, my dad and I would play number 2 on Christmas Eve every year. So there was an intensely personal thing to this. And then just to put, the melancholy, kind of layer on this, my father was terminally ill in April of 2011. He had his kidney removed about 3 weeks prior to me going down, or me flying up and my parents driving down. My dad had no business being there, but he wasn't going to miss it. My dad lasted 6 holes. The pain, they got him a cart. Anyway, I played number 2 with Ben and Lauren Rubenstein, the wonderful, great writer from the Toronto Sun, and Ron Green Jr. from the Charlotte Observer. The 4 of us played. I had a camera crew, captured some great moments. But the greatest thing that happened was Ben and my dad sitting on a bench just off the 5th tee at number 2. My father, who was in the paper industry his whole career, I mentioned that about 2 hours ago. He one of his biggest customers was Nabisco. Now Ben,
he was
wore a
sponsored.
Nabisco visor for many years. Ben had a Nabisco visor on the Sunday of the 89 Masters when it was pouring down rain, had to throw the visor off on the 16th green because the rain was falling off the end of the brim of his visor, tossed it toward Carl Jackson, made that birdied 17, then bogeyed 18. Anyway, my dad brought a Nabisco visor that Ben had signed many years before for me. And he brought it, and they sat on that bench, and they talked about shared relationships with R.J. Reynolds and Nabisco.
Wow.
And I have a wonderful picture of the 2 of them sitting on that bench, and I have a picture of the 3 of us. That's it. That's it. I mean, that is my champion in life, standing with the only guy that I ever hitched my wagon to in an emotional way that was for a lifetime, and still to this day, I root for Ben's success and everything that he does, and made the pilgrimage to Sandhills last September for the first time with my best friend. The only place really on my bucket list that I said, I have a responsibility to go there, and it was Mecca. So that And I have the DVD. I have the disc. I wrapped in a couple of putts early in our round in 2011 on number 2 with the cameras rolling. I made a putt on 2. I made a putt on 3. I made about a 12-footer for par on 5. And I have Ben Crenshaw on tape saying, you've got a really good stroke.
Oh, my gosh.
Then I could have walked off right then.
You're done. I'm done.
Sold my golf clubs, left the golf business, and moved to a shack in Idaho.
Yeah, that's it. You're done.
And just become a potato farmer. Not even a farmer. I would have just delivered them to whomever. But that's it. I mean, that's all I got, and it's as good and as deep and as sweet as anything I could ever hope to have with him. And unfortunately, the most important figure in my life who was gone 3 months later.
Wow. That's such a great story. I appreciate you sharing that one. That's
gosh.
Awesome. That's an awesome story. How is this putting stroke? I mean, because you got
it was still Ben. It still had this remarkable arc and release to it. It just so. And in talking to him about putting, and I've talked to Faxon about, like the greatest tip that he ever got from Ben. And when he told me what the tip was, it made me think so vividly about watching him putt that day on those greens. Of all the greens that I could watch him, putt on other than Augusta Nash would be, the topography and the contouring of the greens at number 2 was something that Brad told me when we did a Golf Channel Academy series together at Old Sandwich, a golf course that he and Bill Core did in Plymouth, Mass, which is fantastic. And I said, what's the best putting tip you ever got? And he said, it was from Ben Crenshaw. I was struggling putting early in my career. I was at Disney. So on the practice putting green. And I said, Ben, will you just take a look at my stroke? And he watched me wrap a few putts, and he said, Brad, you're way too stagnant. You need to move a little. And Brad's like, what do you mean move?
Yeah, supposed to keep my head down. Supposed to keep my head down and don't move. And
he said, no. You can't be wooden when you putt. You can't be stagnant. There has to be something in your body that is moving in a very supple, very subtle way. He said, even if it's just a little flexing of your knee as you draw the putter back or through the impact zone, your body cannot be rigid. And he said, I have never putted the same since. And as he was telling me this, I'm thinking about Crenshaw, and I remember watching him, and as he took this big wide arc back and again, release through the putter, and you have this back to in to square to in again. And I was thinking about through the impact zone, how as I'm looking at the shaft in his hands, as you look just a little bit down, how the crease in his trousers just changed just microscopically. There was just that very subtle flex. And I'm like, holy crap.
I didn't even see it, but now I do.
There it is. I mean, it's just, so, he was, to watch him putt and to talk to him. And he and Gil Hance came on my podcast last year, and it was all about design. It was all about, that aspect of the game. But he's there's such depth and range and breadth to what it is that you can talk to him about, that it's almost catatonic in the way that you become so fixated on what he's saying. And he's doing it in such a syrupy way. It's a hell of an experience to spend time with him.
Yeah, that's definitely an episode that I need to try and record at some point.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, because that would be fantastic. Well, you're right. It's 2 hours, but 2 hours well spent, and I hope that we can do this. I hope we can do it again, because we have
absolutely.
We got tons more to talk about. But Stay safe, stay healthy.
You too.
We'll do this again. I appreciate you stopping by the back of the range.
Absolutely, my friend. I look forward to talking real soon.
And there you have it. Special thanks to Gary Williams for joining me on the first of, I hope, many episodes here at the Back of the Range. Don't forget, follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Every single episode is available at thebackoftherange.com. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time here at the Back of the Range.